The whistling in the woods. After the divorce, I didn't have many options. I had no savings, no place to call my own. So I packed what little I had into the back of my truck and drove from Birmingham to Chadam, Alabama, a quiet little town surrounded by rolling woods and forgotten farmlands. My destination was my grandfather's old house. He passed away 3 years ago, and the house had been sitting there since, untouched, unsold. My parents kept saying they'd fix it up or rent it out, but no one ever did. I remembered it from childhood visits, a creaky old place with tall ceilings, dusty corners, and a wood-burning stove that seemed to breathe like a living thing in winter. I figured solitude might do me good, healing even. The property sat on 10 acres of woods, 10 minutes from town. No neighbors in sight, no traffic sounds. Just the whispering trees and the occasional hoot of an owl at night. The first few days were peaceful. I unpacked, cleaned the place up, and sat on the porch in the evenings with a cold beer, listening to nothing. It was the kind of nothing that city folks pay good money to hear. But then the whistling started. It was the 7th night. I just crawled into bed around midnight, letting the mattress cradle me in that half-sleep where the world goes quiet. That's when I heard it. A tune. Off-key. Whistled slowly like someone trying to remember how the song went. It came from behind the house, somewhere in the woods. At first I figured it was a hunter, or maybe a teenager out late drinking. Strange, sure, but not terrifying. The woods attract all kinds of people. Still, something about the tune set my teeth on edge. There was no rhythm to it, no joy, just slow, broken notes dragged out like a warning. The next night, it came again. Same time, just past 1 a.m. This time, it was closer. The whistle began deep in the woods and floated toward the house in slow, eerie puffs of breath. I turned on the porch light, grabbed my flashlight, and walked the perimeter. But I didn't see anything. No movement, no tracks, no animals scattering. And when I shut off the flashlight and stood still, I realized the whistling had stopped, like it knew I was listening. I mentioned it to Deputy H the following afternoon. He'd been the town's deputy for 30-something years and had the kind of leathery face that told you he'd seen too much and still didn't quite believe half of it. I half laughed when I told him about the tune. To my surprise, his face fell serious. "Your granddaddy used to call us about that," he said. "Every spring, always late at night, always someone whistling through the trees." He paused, looking out the window of the diner where we sat. We checked it out a dozen times, never found tracks, never heard the sound ourselves. We figured he was just getting old. Maybe it was birds, maybe it was wind. But now I was hearing it. When I got home that evening, I double-checked every lock. I shut the windows tight, drew the blinds, and even shoved chairs under the doorknobs like I was expecting a hurricane. But the whistle still came, louder than before. And this time, it sounded like it was right outside the kitchen window. I didn't sleep that night. 2 nights later, I heard it from beneath the house, through the floorboards. I dropped my glass on the floor and backed up, shotgun in hand. I spent the whole night sitting in a kitchen chair, barrel pointed at the crawlspace vent under the fridge. The next day, I rummaged through the attic, hoping maybe my grandfather had written something down. Sure enough, I found an old metal box buried under stacks of blankets. Inside were journals, letters, and one strange note. "If it whistles from inside, never respond." I read through his journal entries. For over a decade, he'd written about the tune. He believed someone was watching the house. Not a ghost, not some spirit, but a real person. Someone with an obsession. Someone who came back every spring. He never told the family. Maybe he didn't want us to worry. Or maybe he thought no one would believe him. I called Deputy H again. When he read the journal, his face turned ashen. "Stay inside," he warned. "And whatever happens, don't open the door unless you know who's knocking." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the lights off and the shotgun on my lap. At 1:17 a.m., right on schedule, the whistling started. But this time, it came from inside, from the hallway. I froze. The sound echoed off the walls, soft, broken, wrong. I reached for the hallway light switch and flipped it on. Nothing. Empty. I walked slowly, every step like walking on glass. When I reached the end of the hall, I turned to see nothing. But my ears swore it had been there. I checked every window and door. Nothing had been broken. Nothing was open. 2 quiet days passed. I started hoping maybe it was over. Maybe whoever it was had moved on. But on the 3rd night, I woke up to 3 soft knocks on the back door. Knock. 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 I held my breath. Silence. Then, the hallway floor creaked. I grabbed the shotgun and stepped out into the hallway. At the far end, just beneath the broken ceiling fan, stood a man in black. He wasn't moving, just standing there. His skin was pale like wet paper. His eyes were shadowed, but I could feel them on me. Watching. Studying. "Don't move," I croaked, my voice barely functioning. He didn't move. He didn't speak. Then he lifted his legs slowly, as if preparing to sprint. "Stop!" I screamed, finger tightening on the trigger. He vanished. Darted left, out of sight, faster than I thought possible. I heard the front door slam open. I ran after him and fired a single shot into the woods, not in the air, into the darkness. If I hit him, I'd never know. I drove into town and slept in my truck that night. The next morning, I returned with Deputy H. The front door was unlocked again. No forced entry, nothing stolen. But someone had a key. That was it for me. I changed the locks within the hour and packed everything I could. Family photos, birth certificates, my grandfather's journals. I took it all. I left that house and drove straight to my parents' place 3 states away. I never went back. A few weeks later, my father sold the house. He left out the parts about a decade-long stalker who might have had a copy of the key. We'll never know who that man was, how long he'd been out there, or why he fixated on my grandfather, and then me. All I know is I don't live in the country anymore. And every spring, when the wind whistles through the trees at night, I make sure my windows are locked, my lights are on, and I never, ever answer the knock. The Lantern Man of Bridal Hollow. My name's Lucas, and this happened when I was 26. I'd been working a remote IT job for about a year, and after saving up enough, I decided to move out of the city and into the country. The idea was to escape the chaos. No more traffic, no more neighbors stomping above me, no more noise. Just silence, trees, and maybe some peace of mind. I found a listing for a cheap rental cabin just outside a rural settlement called Bridal Hollow, deep in the Appalachian foothills of Kentucky. It was an old hunting lodge that had been converted into a livable cabin. The picture showed an open porch, a wood-burning stove, and dense forest in every direction. It was perfect. Or so I thought. Bridal Hollow itself wasn't really a town. It was more like a loose collection of homes spread out along winding back roads. The nearest real town was nearly 40 minutes away. I didn't mind. I liked the idea of being off the grid. The landlord, an old-timer named Mr. Beckett, was nice enough. grizzled, wiry, with a voice like gravel soaked in bourbon. When he handed me the keys, he said something odd. "You'll hear things at night," he muttered, not looking me in the eye. "You keep the lights low and don't look out the windows after midnight. Got it?" I laughed. "Coyotes." He didn't smile. "Sure, let's call it that." I chalked it up to old mountain superstition. That first week, I settled in just fine. I chopped wood for the stove, set up my desk by the window overlooking the trees, and even started a little routine: morning hikes, evening whiskey, and early bedtimes. But something changed in week 2. It was a Tuesday night. I stayed up a bit later than usual watching a documentary. Around midnight, the power flickered. Not unusual in a place like this. But then, through the window behind me, I noticed a faint light moving through the woods. At first, I thought it was a flashlight, but it was too soft, too golden, like an old lantern. It bobbed slowly between the trees, almost rhythmic in the way it moved, like someone walking carefully along a familiar path. I stepped onto the porch to get a better view. The air was still. No wind, no insects, just the chirp of far-off frogs. The light stopped. It sat still between 2 trees, maybe 50 yards away. Then it moved again, toward the cabin. I didn't know why, but my heart started hammering in my chest. Something about the way it moved felt wrong, like it wasn't swinging the way a real lantern would with someone walking. It floated, just slightly above the ground. I backed inside and shut the door, turned off the interior lights. I watched from behind the curtain. The light came all the way to the edge of the yard and stopped. There was no silhouette, no person holding it. Just the light, floating alone. Then it slowly dimmed and vanished. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I drove into town and asked around at the general store. A woman named Ruby, who ran the place, gave me a funny look when I asked about lights in the woods. "You seen the lantern man?" she asked in a flat voice. I blinked. "Excuse me?" She leaned across the counter. "He's been around longer than Bridal Hollow. My grandmother used to say he was one of the first settlers, a trapper who got lost during a snowstorm and froze to death with his lantern still burning. They say he walks the woods looking for warmth, for someone to follow him so he won't be alone." I laughed nervously. "Like a ghost story?" Ruby didn't smile. "No one laughs when folks go missing." She told me people vanish in those woods every couple of years. Hunters, hikers, transients. They find their campsites, they find their gear, but never the person. She leaned closer and said, "If you see the lantern again, don't follow it. Don't look at it too long. And whatever you do, don't let it in." I should have listened. That Friday, I stayed up again. I couldn't stop thinking about the light. At exactly 12:21 a.m., it returned. Same spot, same golden glow. But this time, there was more. It wasn't just one light. There were 2, then 3, then 4. All floating in a slow line through the trees, weaving in and out like a silent procession. I froze. Something inside me whispered, "Don't open the door." But I did. I stepped out onto the porch. The lights stopped, as if they sensed me. Then one of them slowly broke from the line and began drifting toward me again. It stopped about 20 feet from the porch, and then it spoke. Not with a voice, but in my mind, like a whisper inside my skull. "You don't have to be alone." I backed into the cabin, shut the door, and killed all the lights. I heard footsteps on the gravel outside. Slow, deliberate. They circled the cabin once, then again. The third time, they stopped at the front door. 3 knocks, hollow, measured. I didn't move. Then the doorknob turned, once, twice, slowly. It was locked. But I remembered something. Mr. Beckett never mentioned replacing the locks. What if someone had a key? My heart raced. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and braced myself behind the couch. The doorknob stopped moving. Then silence. Minutes passed. Then a voice, clear as day, called from the front door. It was my mother's voice. "Lucas, honey, it's cold out here. Let me in." My blood turned to ice. "My mother lives 300 miles away," the voice repeated. Softer, sadder. "Lucas, please, I'm so tired." I didn't answer. Eventually, the voice faded, replaced by that soft whistling wind through the trees. I stayed up till sunrise. The next morning, I called Mr. Beckett. Before I could even explain, he said, "You seen him, didn't you?" I didn't speak. He sighed. "I warned you." I demanded answers. He told me the Lantern Man was no ghost, no man. He was something else. Something that took people's shapes, their voices, their grief. He feeds on loneliness, on invitation. "You don't let him in," Beckett said. "You never let him in." That night, I packed everything. I was leaving. Around 9 p.m., just as I finished loading my truck, the power went out. Then the lights returned. Dozens of them this time. Encircling the cabin, a wall of golden flickers, each one pulsing like a heartbeat. I locked the doors, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark with the knife in my hand. At 12:21 a.m., the knocking began again. But this time it came from every door, every window. A chorus of voices followed. My father, my ex, my late brother, all calling my name, begging, pleading, crying. Then the whispers, so many whispers. "You don't have to be alone. Let us in. Just one look. You'll feel better." I covered my ears and screamed. Suddenly, silence. No lights, no voices, just darkness. I left at dawn. I didn't stop driving until I hit Tennessee. I moved in with my cousin for a while and eventually found a new apartment back in the city. The cabin is still out there. Mr. Beckett still rents it to people who don't ask too many questions. Maybe they think the stories are just folklore. Maybe they think the silence will fix them like I did. But silence in a place like that, it isn't empty. It listens. It waits. And when it knows you're lonely enough, it knocks.